All right, hey guys. So today we are going to talk a little bit about the 7 elements of news. So they're pretty important. They're going to follow you throughout the rest of the semester. So it says there are 7 elements that affect news and the relevance it will have to its audience. So I want you to stop and think if there's any things that you think that you need to have in your news story. 7 things or one thing that you can think of that would make that story important. We're going to go ahead and start with the first one, and that's timeliness. So basically, timing matters for news stories. Immediacy is pretty important. Things that are about to happen or things that have just happened are going to make the news more important. So an example, like the story about the solar eclipse was way more important and relevant yesterday than it is today. And it's definitely way more important than it's going to be in 2 weeks because it will have already passed and nobody's going to really care about it. So time matters. The second one's impact. So an event that's going to affect a large number of people. You see my little Game of Thrones guy over here and you watch Game of Thrones, you know that winter coming affects a large majority of people. So it could be a local impact, it could be a national impact, it could be a global impact. So an example of a national impact could be when President Trump halted immigration back in spring, and then thousands of Americans were affected by that. An example of a local impact could be when our school's power went out at the end of last year and everybody had to stand outside for a few hours. So yeah, that impacted a lot of people's lives. The third one's prominence. So it's a story about someone important or well-known, a prominent figure. Locally, that could be a principal. That could be a well-known student, maybe student body president. That could be a mayor. Nationally, that could be the president, any famous artists or actors or celebrities. Public officials are very prominent people. People who are well known. So why this matters. So if your neighbor were to fall off a ladder and break his leg, that's probably not going to be very newsworthy. However, if President Trump fell off of a ladder and broke his leg, that's newsworthy just because he's so well known. So people want to know what's happening to those well-known people. The fourth one's proximity. And that's going to be the story's location. Why it's important. Is it close to the reader? Close proximity, closeness. If a tornado hits in Kansas, that might affect us, and like we might know somebody in Kansas and we might be upset for them. But if a tornado happened in St. Louis, the proximity of that is going to be much more impactful for us. That can also apply to national news. So maybe something happens in America, and that's a huge deal to us because that's our nation. Whereas if something were to happen in Spain, like that might not be as big of a deal because it's not happening in our nation. The fifth one's novelty, which is the super weird, creepy Bitmoji cat over here. So the thing that happened in the story is rare or strange. It's not common. That doesn't mean it has to be super weird. It just means like it doesn't happen all the time. So like the solar eclipse had a little bit of novelty in it because it was so out there. Like it doesn't happen very often. This is a really famous saying when it comes to teaching journalism, and I'm not sure why, but I'm going to share it with you. If a dog bites a man, that's not newsworthy. Dogs bite people. It's not that crazy. However, if a man were to bite a dog, that's news because that doesn't happen very often. Strange analogy, but there you go. You'll see a lot of novelty and feature stories. So stories about people who have weird talents, or maybe something strange happened to them. Maybe they went on a trip and they got attacked by a chimpanzee. Like that's novelty. That's very strange. Shark being in the Lake of the Ozarks, that would be novelty. So our sixth one's going to be conflict or controversy. Sorry, that's my dog barking. Ugh. Our sixth one's going to be conflict or controversy. So that means we have important issues, and maybe they're being debated, or maybe they're at odds. Maybe they're being called into question. Kaya. Oh my goodness. We'll see this a lot with politics. It could be a conflict between maybe the school and the teacher if we're looking at it more locally. It could be a conflict between the administration and a teacher or a student. And then lastly, we'll see this with maybe protests or conflicts within the community. And then our last one's going to be emotions or human interest. So stories that really pull it at our heartstrings. They're interesting, maybe they're motivating. They inspire, they make us laugh, they make us cry. They really get to our emotions. So the main thing for these stories is they connect the readers to each other and within their community. So it's making you feel like you're a part of something or like you can relate to something. An example of this could be maybe a mother and a daughter overcome cancer together. Or maybe a student gets into a car accident and maybe he's paralyzed or something, but he continues to play sports in a wheelchair. Like he overcomes that. It's not always about overcoming things, but it's those stories that really pull at our emotions. Like a kid gets adopted or something like that. And they don't always have to be happy either. Like sad stories are important too. So the more of the 7 elements that you have in a story, the more powerful and important that story is. You typically won't find all 7 of those elements in a story. Like a lot of news stories aren't going to have a lot of emotion in them because we're trying to be unbiased. But the more you can get in there, definitely the better.